Welcome to Wordslinger's Way and welcome to CONvergence. I assume this is probably everyone's first event this year, right? This is what you chose? We will do our best to set the tone for the weekend for you. Welcome to Wordslinger's Way and welcome to the Wordslinger Reading Hour. What this is I call this, it's like speed dating for your new favorite creative. These are invited participants. These are writers and performers and authors and basically local talent who goes onto a stage and attempts to entertain you with words. We are short one of our performers tonight. Sean Duke was not able to make it, but we are fortunate there was another writer in the room who was able to step up. So please welcome to the stage, Phillip Lowe. Oh, hello. Yeah, that's about the caliber of what you can expect, so. All right, let me find something to hit. Oh, here we go. This is called Flesh. You know, I never believed in love at first sight. I've always been one of those who believes that the applicable basis of love is work, the long, slow, arduous process of learning to love someone. Anything else, anything that instantaneous, well, what else could that be but some kind of hormonal rush? The human mind is a flexible instrument skilled at creating any kind of rationalization for our chemical impulses. But surely that in itself is a rationalization, some desire to create the illusion of control. Because if love at first sight does exist, then the idea of control is an illusion. Love at first sight, if you really think about it, it's a horrifying concept. It means that our species is composed of nothing beyond a series of chemical impulses. And I was recently brought face to proverbial face with that reality in the same place that so many people are, a doctor's office. She laid out the results of the MRI to me, showed me what was truly taking place beneath my facade of flesh. And that's when I first saw her. I didn't just see her, but really saw her. I know what you must be thinking. What emotional responses are reliable in those heightened moments? I was being informed of the possibility, no, the probability of my own death. And as I fell away from the life that I knew, I reached out and grabbed whatever I first saw. I can't ridicule you for it. It's not too long ago that I would have thought the same thing. It's a perfectly rational thought, after all. I can't even say that I necessarily think that you're wrong, but as I began my descent, the right and the wrong of it ceased to constitute themselves to me. I simply chose to embrace my chemical reality. There was no mistaking the reality before us. She was lodged in my heart, had been lodged there for some time, unbeknownst to me. But that moment of becoming aware of her presence, the novelty of it, and that doctor had the nerve to call her malignant. Malignant. It's a beautiful word. It comes from the Latin, you see. Mal is bad, and ignis means fire. And fire, yes, she was bad, a dark fire in my heart. Sarcoma, the doctor called her, this tumor, this malignancy buried at the core of my being. Sarcoma, a filthy word and a rational one, but one that sings to the soul of a philologist. Sarcoma, from the Greek, sarx, meaning flesh, and she was flesh of my flesh. That is what a cancer is, after all, mutated cells. She was formed from the same stuff as I. Was there an element of Narcissus embedded in my love, then, of incest? A weak man, uncertain in his own heart, would say to you, judge not. because he doubts, he fears, and your judgment represents threat. But I say, judge. What care have I? Your judgment cannot take her from me. We are bound too tightly to be parted by anything but poison and death. Poison, oh God, save us, poison. The doctor proposed poison to us, proposed driving a demon into our shared flesh, one with an ancient name, chemotherapy. Chemo, chemical, alchemy, they loathe her so deeply that they would poison me to make her die. She will kill me, they say, without their alchemy, their poisons. And I say, yes. Why, they say. They try to bewilder me with words, with Latin and Greek, but I know these tongues better than they, and I have another word for them. Parasitos. From the Greek, para, beside, sitos, food, one who sits beside and eats the food of another. Yes, she is a parasite, and I say, what of that? To be inhabited by her, to have her force her way into me, inside of me. This it is to be needed by someone. To have someone need you so badly with a sweet enough madness that they will kill you dead. I know that someone out there, someone listening to me, understands what I am saying. To be needed to death. And yes, I will lay myself before her, let her take what she desires of me, ravage me, devastate me, subject me to a true mortification of the flesh. Christ said, greater love hath no man than this, that a man lay down his life for his friends. Oh God, to give myself, to truly abandon myself to another, to be destroyed by another. It's not the worst relationship I've ever been in. So don't pretend you don't understand. Somebody out there understands what I'm saying. She needs me so deeply that she will destroy me. And I love her so deeply that I will permit her to. My body is nothing more than the flesh sarx which she, sarcoma, inhabits. Oh, suicide, they say, and yes, suicide it is, but a deeper one than they realize. No mere physical suicide, a death of the body, though I will give my life for her, but a moral suicide. I give her not only my body, but my soul. And I wonder, will we experience the inferno of Dante? Will the two of us be sent to the lover's hell, tossed about eternally in a dark, damp whirlwind, whirling, whining, wailing through the void forever? My rational mind emerges, if only for an instant, and I know that that fancy is madness, not merely insanity, but inanity. The two of us will die. She will feed upon me until I have nothing left, and then we will both expire, and we will be laid into the earth, myself in a coffin, and myself as her coffin. She will consume me, and I will entomb her, enwomb her. And we will decay there, she within me, become one flesh, sarx and sarcoma, and the two of us shall truly rot together. Thanks. All right, let's keep it going for Phillip Lowe. I didn't say stop. All right. We have other performers tonight. I mean, I don't know why you'd want them, but they exist. Up next, we have a Mr. Harrigan. Patrick Harrigan, local blowhard, occasionally edits academic books about new media and games, for example, first person, second person, third person zones of control, co-hosts a podcast about the TV show Doctor Who at GetOffMyWorldPodcast.com, and inflicts spoken word pieces on Twin Cities audiences, collected in the books The Lecture Tour and On Tour Forever. Despite this, He is usually pleasant to be around, and you should buy him a drink sometime. Please welcome to the stage, Pat Harrigan.
Thank you, Phillip. This was hilarious. Thanks. Oh, it's way unintuitive. Down this forward. There we go. Good afternoon. The story goes that Napoleon Bonaparte thought Franz Lepich was a madman. In 1811, Lepich, a German inventor, had approached Bonaparte with the idea of constructing hot air balloons for military use, but Bonaparte had sent him packing. Yet this isn't the whole story. The Committee of Public Safety had already constructed the world's first military observation balloon, Les Entrepreneurs, in 1793, and the Compagnie d'Aéronautiers was established the following year. The company did good service at Maubeuge, Charleroi, and Fleurus, and they accompanied Bonaparte to Egypt, but their equipment was destroyed there by the British, and Bonaparte disbanded the company in 1799. So, when Lepich showed up a dozen years later, Bonaparte was already all over the balloon thing. Or so we have always believed. But friends, my semester of research at the Bibliothèque Nationale, made possible by a grant from the Forbes Hamilton Fund, has revealed a different story. In a sealed, lead-lined room, unopened since 1900, I have discovered troves of dusty, ribbon-tied documents consisting of maps, diaries, newspaper articles, eyewitness accounts, military orders, after-action reports, and other material relating to the French Army's hitherto unknown 1812 to 1813 aerial warfare campaign and its unexpected aftermath. Organized under the direction of Marshal Berthier from designs stolen from Lepich and constructed by Italian engineers, the Corps en Volant was first deployed by the Grande Armée in May and June 1812 in a strictly observational capacity during the Peninsular Campaign. There is no evidence that the English or Portuguese ever even saw the balloons, but Barclay de Tollet's Russians certainly did a few months later, because by that time the Corps, having accompanied Bonaparte east, had been armed with incendiary grenades and used these to cause some consternation in the Smolensk streets, contributing, along with the artillery bombardment, to the incineration of the city. Around this time, the Russians began to work on their own balloons and balloon countermeasures with the help of a rather pissed-off Franz Lepich, but no further aerial deployment occurred by any army over the autumn and winter of 1812, which saw Bonaparte's famous approach toward and equally famous disastrous retreat from Moscow. But by spring 1813, events were rapidly evolving. During the May 1813 Battle of Lutzen, a half-dozen French balloons took to the skies to be met by 8 balloons launched by the Prussian and Russian armies. Firepower from ground-based soldiers and artillery proved too inaccurate to bring them down, so an aerial duel of sorts took place, with the practically unnavigable balloons lurching unpredictably toward and away from the enemy, while their crews fired muskets at each other and tried to avoid setting themselves on fire. By the time darkness fell, 2 Russian and 1 French balloon had been lost, and Bonaparte controlled the field. 2 weeks later, at Bautzen, the French had installed primitive air rudders and trained their crews in the use of grappling hooks, resulting in a complete rout of the Allied balloons and the capture of 2 of them. By the siege of Danzig in August, a form of aerial chivalry had emerged, as the crews on all sides, who for weeks had watched men burning and falling, now preferred to fight at close quarters once the grappling hooks had locked them together. Surrenders were common. The Danzig siege was also the debut of the war's most unique element, the deployment by the Corps en Volant of the Singe-Pilote, a special force of Guyanese capuchin monkeys, fearless at heights, adept at knife fighting, and trained to swarm up the ropes of enemy balloons and saw at them until the soldiers either surrendered or the basket dropped to earth. To these monkeys, the coalition had no answer, and for nearly 2 months, until the October battle at Wartenburg, these simian sky privateers and their human assistants commanded air superiority in the German skies. Enormously popular among the rank and file, these tiny troops were equally admired by the officers, and many of them were awarded ersatz medals and decorations, which would be pinned in solemn ceremony to the adorable little blue dress coats they would wear when not on active duty. But at Wartenburg, disaster struck. A massive force of 12 French and 16 Prussian balloons became hopelessly tangled into a gigantic aerial blob. Their crews, monkey and man, locked in desperate hand-to-hand fighting, the entire mass drifting ever upward and far from the main area of ground engagement. At one point, a balloon caught fire, and French and Prussian soldiers worked together to cut it free, lest they all perish together. It was soon after this that a freak autumn storm rolled in, and the entire balloon grouping was blown upward and west, and further west, and upward, the combatants on board gradually ending their fights as they realized the seriousness of their shared predicament, until no one on the ground could see them or knew where they had gone. They never returned. The French were deeply affected by this loss and never found the heart to rebuild the Corps Envolant, all the members of which were posthumously granted the title of Chevalier de l'Empire. Even Minister Talleyrand, usually so très phlegmatique, is said to have wept when reading of the disaster. Ces galopins étant des vrais soldats, he cried, quel horror! We come now to a part of our history that the French historians at the Bibliothèque were desperate to suppress, reflecting as it does so poorly on elements of French soldiery. In spring 1814, the first reports appear of odd occurrences in western Germany and the Low Countries. In April, a small village near Aachen was attacked by bandits in the middle of the night, who absconded with several chickens and farm implements. No sign of the thieves were discovered, although more than one witness reported hearing inexplicable, agitated clucking coming from somewhere up in the clouds. Mere days later, thieves staged a daring midnight raid on Aachen itself, escaping the city with no trace, unseen by the guards on the city walls. They took with them much coinage and small transportable valuables, as well as the great-nephew of the famous architect Johann Joseph Couven, later ransomed back to his family, who told a curious story of being bound and blindfolded and taken on a long sea journey, though Aachen is far from the sea, and of being insolently poked, tickled, and fondled day and night by the hands of tiny, shrieking children. For the next several decades, no city seemed safe, from Frankfurt to The Hague. Guilders, Marks, Pfennigs, and Hellers, no matter how inaccessible, were all vulnerable to the nimble, larcerous fingers of the Capuchons. Prominent citizens would vanish in the night and be sold back, bewildered and seasick. Outraged burgomeisters proffered rewards to no avail. Aristocratic women who kept small companion monkeys, as was the fashion of the time, would awake to the sound of their jewelry boxes being rifled, and in the morning their monkeys, seduced by the vision of a more adventurous life, would be gone. Gradually, reports of this type tapered off, although as late as 1860, rumors still circulated of a multinational, multi-species group of criminals who struck at night and made their escape by some unknown means. Geistertierpiraten, the Germans called them, animal ghost pirates. But from that point, there are no further reports. The Geistertierpiraten float beyond our horizon of knowledge, and the archive, as I have said, was sealed at the turn of the century. However, just last week, I came across an article from the Rheinische Post about an incident at a Dusseldorf circus, during which an 8-year-old girl had her face slapped and her Kinderbar stolen by an aggressive and filthy capuchin monkey, who then proceeded to bare his teeth at a nearby balloon cellar and tear several balloons from his hands, after which he was seen, his chocolate-stuffed mouth chattering mockingly, floating away, borne up into the blue on mylar reproductions of Spider-Man, Elsa, and SpongeBob, while the fairgoers stared in slack-jawed amazement. I have no evidence that this incident is related in any way to the history I have outlined for you here tonight, but I admit I find it suggestive. Thank you, and good night. Last spring, while touring Spain and Portugal, I was introduced over dinner to the well-known Lisbonese novelist João Isidoro Jiménez. To my embarrassment, at that time I had read only a small fraction of Senor Jimenez's vast corpus of work, which for the most part is written in a comically exaggerated vernacular difficult to translate into English, but which I am assured by my Portuguese friends is screamingly funny. But my unfamiliarity with his work was no barrier to conversation with the garrulous Senor, a small, thick-spectacled elderly gentleman fond of scallops, ginginha, and incomprehensible Portuguese puns. Over the long, relaxed meal, I heard his story. In 1967, as a young man in the last days of the Salazar regime, Senor Jimenez had been imprisoned for 10 months, during which time he was severely beaten by the guards, losing sight completely in one eye. The vision in the second eye was also partly compromised. As a consequence, upon his release, he was no longer able to drive a car, not that he could have afforded one at the time, and was forced to travel to his job as a postal worker on the autobus. The commute was not long, about a half hour each way, but it soon became tedious, and to pass the time, Senor Jimenez began to compose, first in his head, and later in imitation of his beloved Vladimir Nabokov on a series of index cards, the outline of what became his first novel, the culture clash comedy, The Señorita in Salt Lake City. Having acquired this habit, he never shook it, and in this way he wrote, for a half hour twice a day, 48 weeks of the year, acknowledging his 4 weeks of vacation during which he would visit his sister's family in the Algarve, the 41 novels and 8 story collections that constitute his output. These books, available in every bookstore and train station in Portugal, but largely unknown on this side of the Atlantic, include such bestsellers as Don Federico and the Lord, There Is No Mother Left Here, Reverdosa Rim Job, the Jose Saramago Literary Prize winner, The Midnight Meal, My Best Abortion, Fascist Follies 1933, and The Rapey Chicken. They are read by all classes of citizen, men and women, rich and poor, right and left wing, and some of the less salacious ones, like Bernardo XYZ, are frequently taught in middle school. But of his many awards and accolades, the Senor seemed most proud of his special pass, granted by the city of Lisbon in 1990, that has allowed him to ride all buses and trains free since that time. One of the few men left sitting with us, it was growing late and most of our table mates had left, leaned forward at this point and said something I couldn't catch. Senor Jimenez translated for me. It's an old joke. He says it's unfair, I owe him half my royalties, so at least I can pay for dinner. And why is that? I asked. Because it was he and some of his friends who beat me during those days at the Fortaleza de Peniche. He says I would never have gotten where I am without him. I found this hard to believe, but they both assured me it was so. Senor Camara had indeed been one of the fortress guards, as was the late Senor Rocha, at whose wedding Jimenez had been best man. Further, he had a nodding acquaintance with 2 or 3 other former guards who still lived in Lisbon, although many had died over the years, and one, the notorious Pesquera, had been assassinated in 1974, a spectacular incident that formed the basis for Jimenez's novel A Incineração de Senor Cabral, later serialized in the Los Angeles Free Press under the title Burning Mr. Fucker. How was it, I asked, that they were able to put such an awful history behind them? Senor Camara waved off my question, saying in effect that it was all a long time ago. But Jimenez's answer was more interesting. He expressed a sort of, I suppose you could call it, systems-type view of human beings, one in which there was little room for personal recrimination. To his way of thinking, human beings were little more than a collection of easily identifiable drives for security, sex, self-expression, ego-stroking, and so on. When those drives were deployed in concordant ways within a healthy system, all was well. But when the timetables were wrong, when the engines were not serviced, when drivers ignore the traffic lights, then disaster. Well, This might be true as far as it went, but I've been around the block a few times myself, and I know when I'm being fucked with. This was cornball wisdom, probably something that Senor Jimenez had used on 100 journalists over the years, who would go back to their editors with 100 variations on the same story about society as a mode of public transit, perfected within a novelist's imagination and able to reconcile one to a painful past. My skepticism must have shown on my face because both of the senors burst out laughing and we moved on to talking about the waitresses. The explanation for this curious friendship, if indeed there is any meaningful explanation, was never forthcoming. Just last week, I received a pre-release copy of Senor Jimenez's most recent novel, The Lecture Tour, which features as its hero a pompous, middle-aged American professor who travels the world bloviating about all manner of nonsense to a bemused audience of far more interesting people. It reminded me of the novels of David Lodge, and naturally, I was flattered. Senor Jimenez also has a habit of giving out, in lieu of autographs, some of the original index cards on which he writes his first drafts, and one was included in the package he sent me. It contains a version of the book's first paragraph, which reads as follows. Professor Pyle, traveling abroad, apologized at every step for his country, as if every American sin were his own. The ladies of Lisbon would tease him to his face, but defend him to their boyfriends, telling them, at least he takes an interest. You've never set foot outside the Barrio Alto. The boyfriends said the professor was a sex fiend, a pervert, and a molester, and that they would beat him up and he would enjoy it. But they did not do that, and the ladies kept attending the professor's lecture and asking him double-edged questions that made him look bad to his audience, and afterward in the hotel room the professor would think of them and masturbate. In the final published version, it was considerably toned down and read only, Professor Pyle, traveling abroad, looked out the bus window at all the lovely women and wished he spoke their language. Senor Jimenez is elderly, and my friends have quietly told me he is not in the best of health. I would never have known. The evening I spent in his company is one of my most treasured memories. The senor was sharp and shrewd and lively, without the hint of a shadow upon him. Whatever his secret, it seems to have worked for him. We should all be so lucky. He has lived his life as a constant comedy, and I have no doubt that when that final tragic day at last arrives, Senor Jimenez will die laughing. Thank you.
And wait. I'll take it. I want to talk to you for a minute. So, hey, hi, Pat. Keep it going for Pat, by the way. You've written 2 books, The Lecture Tour, and, well, you've written more than that, but most recently you've written The Lecture Tour and On Tour Forever, which I would characterize as tongue-in-cheek essays.
Yes, I think that's probably fair. I think the 2 that I read tonight are fairly characteristic.
So how would you say that you fell into this unique niche, which is one I cannot think of anyone else occupying?
It started as pieces that I wrote for the Encyclopedia Show, which is an open word or open mic spoken word thing that they used to do at Kieran's. And so watching the people there, I was like, oh, I could use a lot of the trivial, useless knowledge in my mind to do something. And it's just grown from there.
Well, I feel obliged to tell you that you've misunderstood the Encyclopedia Show. The function of it is to propose a topic and then for you to rifle through whatever you already have and desperately try to match it to the theme, not to carefully create a persona dedicated to comically educating your audience.
Well, I wish someone had told me that 6 years ago.
But 6 years later, this is the niche that you and Matthew Kesson occupy.
Yes, Guest of Honor Matthew Kesson was a big example for me to follow with this type of approach.
How do you know he didn't follow you?
Because time moves in one direction.
As far as we know. All right, keep it going for Pat Harrigan.
Thank you, Pat. Thank you.
All right. We have another performer for you tonight.
Woo.
All right. I can accept that. You know, I'm not even going to ask for another response. I just sort of accept that is emotionally the place that we are all occupying. Please welcome to the stage, Mr. Kelvin Hatle.
Yes, he said in a polite but very bored tone. You get one wish. Gerald gaped. He certainly wasn't expecting this. Who would? Genies don't exist. Anyone with a shred of skepticism would tell you that. But here he was, right in front of him. An actual, real, flesh and blood genie. That is, if genies had flesh and blood, but Gerald wasn't about to debate that point. I'm sure this is quite a shock to you, the genie said. Take your time, I can wait. He took a drag from his cigarette. Gerald wished the genie wouldn't smoke in his apartment. Ah, what a terrible thought. He almost blurted out, I wish you wouldn't smoke in my apartment. And that would have totally boned him. Look, I cannot smoke if you want. The genie ground out the cigarette on his own palm. That's not considered to be a wish. It's just a simple matter of manners and respect. Gerald gaped again. He was reading his thoughts. Yes, I am reading your thoughts. He continued in his smooth, lightly accented voice. Not difficult for a supernatural being. I'm sure you have many questions. I'll get to the obvious ones out of the way, if that's all right. First, yes, I am wearing a Brooks Brothers suit and tie, and not some sort of gauzy Renaissance Festival belly dancer outfit. Why would I wear that? I'm not a belly dancer. It would be similar to you as an American parading around in an Uncle Sam suit. I just need to appear in some manner that whomever summoned me would find impressive. I guess in your world that would be business executives. Surprisingly mundane, but that is fine. Second, yes, I came out of the IKEA desk lamp you were trying to assemble. The Flubo model, I believe. Why an IKEA lamp? You may have noticed that oil lamps are not particularly common in the second decade of the 21st century. But a lamp is a lamp is a lamp when you get down to it. No, I wasn't trapped in an IKEA lamp, waiting for some innocent to release me. Lamps are just the portal through which we enter your realm. It doesn't even have to be a lamp, precisely. Any light source will work. I manifested through pickup headlights, flickering fluorescents, an actual dumpster fire, and one memorable time through a firework that had just blown off some poor unfortunate's fingers. 3 guesses what his wish was, and the first 2 don't count. Third, this is not a test. I'm not here to twist your words around or to teach you some moral lesson about selfishness or selflessness. There are enough unintended consequences already with the way you mortals run things. I and my ilk have no intention of adding to them. We were never about that. The genie loosened his tie. Do you mind if I sit down? Gerald shook his head, and the genie eased himself into the IKEA couch with a sigh. Oh, the solder heaven, a fine choice. As I was saying, we genie kind were never playing tricks on you. Our intentions were never malicious. I've personally always detested these sorts of intellectual gotcha games. Intellectual wankery is all it was. Our reputation for trickery was just simple miscommunication from your perspective. I suppose you would consider us on the spectrum. We hadn't really quite grasped the art of speaking to mortals. We weren't twisting your words around, we were just interpreting them literally. And we didn't understand how your relationships worked. All those people wishing for true love, and we just saddled them with the worst, clingiest of stalkers. Outright psychopaths. We genuinely thought that was what you wanted. The genie looked very tired. I'm so ashamed of it all. Anyway, that was centuries ago. We've learned not to take your words so strictly. Not knowing what to do, Gerald simply nodded. He hugged his IKEA desk lamp to his chest like a chrome teddy bear. He hadn't been aware these questions were even running through his mind, but the genie's responses put him more at ease. Since you have a fourth question, why me? To that I can only answer, why not? I don't intend to be glib, but that's really the best answer I can give. There's little rhyme or reason as to why these things happen. Call it fate, the forces of chaos, the whims of a fickle god, what have you. I personally have no control over where and when I manifest myself in your universe. I dearly wish that I did, and yes, I see the irony in that statement. The vulgarities and nightmares we've released, that is all trap in a sense. Not an oil lamp from antiquity, but the inherent unpredictability of a cold reality. Sorry, could I trouble you for some gum? Gerald was startled by the request. He didn't stop to wonder why the genie didn't just make his own gum magically appear, or why a genie would need gum in the first place. He set down the desk lamp and fished around in his IKEA Bjork's Nest end table, finally producing a pack of gum. The genie gratefully accepted a stick. Thank you, that's kind of you. It helps with my nicotine cravings. Anyway, back to the point of my visit. What is your wish? Wealth is a popular one, and honestly quite a safe bet. All those stories about individuals suddenly coming into a fortune and being beset with troubles are absolute tosh. When you have money, you can hire people to contend with those troubles. The genie looked about Gerald's cramped apartment, taking in the billy shelves crammed with heavily used books and DVDs. Not to presume, but based on your decorating and entertainment choices, I would think money would probably be at the top of your list. Gerald wasn't sure why he blurted out what he did. Maybe it was the unreality of the whole situation. Maybe it was the genie's forthright, polite manner. Maybe it was because he had recently rewatched The Spy Who Loved Me and the genie vaguely reminded him of Roger Moore. Or maybe he was just tired. But Gerald said, I'd like a friend. The genie raised an eyebrow. That is most honest of you. Commendable. Gerald picked the desk lamp up again and started to toy with it. He always needed something to do with his hands when he was nervous. I don't have any friends. I realize that now. I thought I had a friend, a best friend, and I married her, but it turns out she wasn't much of a friend. And we divorced, and I moved out, and all her stuff was her stuff, really, and all of my friends were her friends, really. I never really knew anything about decorating or what I liked with furniture and stuff, so I just went and got a bunch of stuff at IKEA. I guess I had friends of my own, but I guess, I don't know, they thought I was boring or stupid or something. And they never returned my texts or anything. My ex-wife and her friends just sort of, condescended to me and took me for granted. Maybe that made them feel good about themselves, I don't know. I guess I don't know what a friend is, really. I just want a friend, a real friend. The genie leaned forward, studying his fingernails for a moment. Then he looked up at Gerald. This is unprecedented in my experience. I am rather moved by your statement. This is very rare. There are any number of noble wishes I've heard in my millennia, world peace and all that, but I am not moved by their virtue. Perhaps I've heard too many of them and know all too well that such grandiose wishes do not take, human nature being simply too chaotic, too unpredictable to be altered with Such simple, broad strokes. His wish is honest in a way that is staggeringly uncommon. The genie took a deep breath and stood up. Please forgive me if you find this presumptuous, but I would like to offer my services as your friend. However, you must be aware of one thing. By accepting my offer of friendship, my supernatural powers will be gone. I'll be removing myself from my native world and will become a part of your mortal one. We will not be flying off on magic carpets or any other contrivances to great adventures. There will be no heaps of gold, no harems of willing partners, no banquets or lordships. However, I will retain my encyclopedic knowledge of the world, history, and art, such as it is. I can assure you our conversations will be most memorable. I'll be a true and steadfast friend. I will listen to you and offer comfort in times of need and laugh at your jokes. The loss of my supernatural abilities is no great sacrifice for me, I can assure you. It may be difficult for mortals to grasp the absolute tedium of supernatural existence, the dreary sameness of it all. But I'd be glad to be rid of it. I do believe a friendship with you would be exceedingly satisfactory. The genie indicated the DVD of The Spy Who Loved Me that was laid on the IKEA lunar coffee table. I also enjoy James Bond films. Cracking stuff. I'll gladly watch any of them with you, with the exceptions of Die Another Day and Moonraker. Gerald choked back a tear. I would love that. I would really love that. Would you be my friend, Genie? Please, said the genie. Call me Robert.
Let's keep it going for Kelvin Hatle. So the thing that springs to mind for me, when I first met you many years ago, my sense of you was as an improv comic. You did a lot of things, but that was the thing I went for at the time.
I was doing a lot of that, yeah.
And I feel like over the years I've watched you easing your way into this spoken word storytelling sort of comedy.
Yeah.
And, I don't know if you want to speak to what prompted that.
Well, I wanted to do something more scripted and written, and I wasn't entirely certain I could get anyone to participate with me in like a multi-person play. You know, like the people I most wanted to work with are, you know, the people everyone wants to work with, and I didn't think they'd be available. So I kind of focused on what I could do with myself and the stuff I have laying around the house, basically. And
the honesty of that speaks to, as a solo performer, I think this is all of our origin stories.
What can you do with what you have? And that's what I did.
Because it's funny, because I've, and as someone who's also done both, and I am terrible at improv, I just want to put that out there, but I've done it, they feel weirdly almost opposed to me in terms of like a left brain, right brain, like being spontaneously engaged in the moment and, you know, at 3 a.m. laboring over a word choice that is annoying.
Well, a lot of improv is, people think it's like thinking really fast, but it's really kind of the absence of thought.
Yeah.
You know, you're just saying, I mean, and I found this to be true with some of my scripted stuff. Some of the lines that got the biggest reactions from the audience were things I didn't really intend to be funny. I was literally just trying to get from point A to point B. You know?
Oh, it's freaking brutal.
and I just, for some reason, that was really funny. I was like, okay.
But yeah, the notion that, like, you know, the clever multi-layered joke that you've labored over, dead silence from the audience, a couple of filler jokes you threw in to get you to the next thing are the ones that everyone, you know.
I remember reading some interview with Steve Martin where he was talking about The Jerk, and he was saying, like, the jokes that he thought were by far the funniest things in The Jerk were ones that didn't get a lot of response.
Oh yeah, there's an inverse relationship between how much I love what I'm writing and how much anyone watching it loves what I'm writing.
At some point, you just have to amuse yourself. I think this is funny. It's funny.
Awesome. Kelvin Hatle, and I'd say we got a few minutes here. Pat, you guys want to grab a seat and we'll chat for a minute because I got two of my favorite people here and we got a few minutes and I'd love to pick your brains about what is wrong with us and how to do this. Oh yeah, I think that's the illusion we're embracing at the moment. So yeah, humor. I mean, yeah, another thing that leaps out at me is, boy, that was a bunch of really uplifting, life-affirming stories.
I just want to clarify, it takes a lot of effort for me to do that. I am not by nature much of an optimist. But, I don't know, I guess it's therapeutic for me on some level.
I think one of the things that leaps to mind looking over at this table and seeing two people who are, I would say associated with very written and very spoken words. Do you see any sort of disparity between that? What's the difference between reading or writing a comic novel between reading or writing a comic monologue?
Yeah, I can speak to that. That's one thing that sort of surprised me when I started doing the spoken word stuff several years ago was I think that a spoken word piece is more effective if you're speaking in a particular voice, which is kind of where I dialed in on the pompous professor voice there. I found that when I tried to write stuff that had too many characters, he said, she said, they did this, lots of action, stuff like that, the audience finds it difficult to parse a lot of that, and it feels disjointed when you read it. So to have even an artificial narrator, kind of like the one that I have, I feel like kind of smooths everything. You can have a complex story told, but it's this person telling the complex story, not you.
Have you considered hats? Like taking off and putting
hats
on
and
hats?
funny voices. Yeah, the Kelvin Hatle approach.
I have a tendency to really write things with like a specific voice in my mind, and I'm still sort of working on the whole thing of like writing for other people and just letting them do it their way,
Yeah.
I haven't done really a lot of directing, and I'm a little scared of it because I don't want to like do the micro directing, which I think would be my instinct because I had such specific characters in mind, but you can't micromanage an actor like that. It's not. It's terrible directing.
Well, you can't let them know.
Yeah, micromanaging. I mean, I would hate to be directed that way.
Well, you've had quite a lot of success directing yourself in one-man shows for like the
Yeah.
festival.
I have gotten a lot of comments that I seem to be unusually good at directing myself. It's, I guess, a weird trait that, I don't know, it just seems normal to me. I don't know what to say about it.
Yeah, I find it very hard to direct myself,
Yeah.
just on a daily basis.
When you
I can barely direct myself to the back.
So when you write dialogue, are you visualizing specific people or actors in your mind, or is that not your way into this?
Sometimes. I try not to do that because I don't know if I'm going to get that actor.
No.
But yeah, I mean, I'm sort of casting as I'm writing, which it kind of reminds me that I don't know if you've seen this, the opening scene of The Player, the movie, the Robert Altman movie, where it's like this long tracking shot through Hollywood, and it's just kind of the camera's just kind of going into various Hollywood pitch meetings, and they're all saying things like, and then there's a young woman, like a Julia Roberts type. And then the other person's like, yeah, I was thinking like a Julia Roberts type. It was just, I don't want to get into that.
So one of the, again, without glancing over this table, the thing that I think unifies you is you both have like a very distinct narrative voice when you write. Is the thought of like writing one of your stories or taking one of your stories and then just handing them off to a different actor or director, is that a bizarre idea to you? Is that the...
I would like to be able to do that. I'm still working to figure out a way to do that. Heck, that might be a show for the Fringe next year. Writers writing things for other writers to read.
Yeah, so much of what I've written in the last couple of years has been so purpose constructed for my own voice that would be a very jarring thing to do. Although I'm still so new at this that having words I've written enacted as part of like a one-act play, for example, still gives me a thrill. Like, I wrote that, and now somebody else is chosen to say those words that are coming off on the stage.
So you wouldn't say no to Patrick Stewart doing the lecture tour?
No, I imagine he would, but...
Well,
I would ask, have you?
I would love to see Patrick Stewart visit your
Sure,
show.
I would ask.
Okay, music.
Maybe you and me, Kelvin, next year will just read each other's stuff for
I would see 100%. See that, you're both writing a solo show for yourselves and then swapping.
I did write a couple one-act plays that were through Fearless. I'm part of this group called Fearless Comedy, and every year they do something called the Fearless Five, which are 5 one-acts based on a theme. And a writer gives it to like some randomly selected, well not randomly selected, but a different director in it, and different actors, and the actors can't be in the directing, and the directors can't be in the writing, and it's all separate. And I did do something last year for that, called the 2nd Annual Upper Midwest Vegan Rib Fest. And it was about like a grunge band from the 90s getting back together to do a show for a vegan rib fest. and things go wrong.
What could go right?
It was one of those things that made me feel a little old, because like I suddenly realized, oh God, all these none of these actors are old enough to really remember the grunge era of rock, and I was like, oh, I should have. Maybe I should have done something there. I don't.
That moment when you write a play and you have to explain all the references to the actors.
Like I had a throwaway line of like, I got the amps of a PT Cruiser. Can someone help me get those? And they didn't know what a PT Cruiser was.
Those aren't so old.
They're not that old. No. But anyway,
Oh, great. Well, I got you here. If someone saw you tonight, they love you, they love your work, and they want to hear more of it, where can that happen? Is there a place online? Should they Google you? Is there what?
Well, the obvious first thing is that Kelvin and I are both on a podcast called Get Off My World, which we talk about classic and modern Doctor Who episodes. So if that's of any interest to you whatsoever, or hearing more of our voices, that would be the place to go.
our release schedule has unfortunately been very irregular in the past couple of years because of pandemic and stuff.
Yeah. We also have Ariel Pinkerton and Joshua Scrimshaw as other co-hosts on that. As far as acquiring my work, it's pretty much only through Amazon right now, but I've got a lot of books out there under Pat Harrigan. So stuff I've edited, stuff I've co-written, stuff I've written myself. So that's where to go for me.
Yeah, my written stuff is not available in any form at the moment. I will be performing as a part of Vilification Tennis on Friday night at the main stage, which is quite a bit different than what I did yesterday. It's like one-liner insult comedy. And I will, strictly as an actor, I will be in the Klingon show at the Mounds Theater this Christmas. The Mounds Theater does a Klingon-themed Christmas show every year, and I've been a part of that for a while now. I'm actually made up as a Klingon, and the show is actually in Klingon with super titles. It's actually pretty amazing. I love doing it.
Awesome. All right, well, keep it going for Pat Harrigan and Kelvin Hatle. Thank you, everyone. Thank you all so much for doing this. Thank you for kicking off your